before I get totally distracted again, bend bows. Yay, we're going to get to them. The reason we want to use bend bows typically is to help push the shape language of our characters. And we can use them for a lot of other things too. So shape language basically means how the eye gets drawn through our poses. So let's take this arm, for example, right here. Notice how the arm kind of has this weird bend in here. It's got a little dip right there. We get the bicep here, which is not bad, but then the back of the arm points this way. It's arcing outwards. And then we get this shape right here. So that elbow, when we look at that, it's not the most visually appealing, is it? It doesn't draw our eye back to the face. Like if I look at the arm here and let my eye kind of follow along, it kind of does whoop this way. That's the wrong direction. I want the curve to point this way towards his face. I want the legs to have this nice kind of appealing curve shape to them. I want to push the visual dynamic view of this pose. That's where bend bows come in. Now you tend to use them more towards the refining phase, but I like to block them in a little bit here. So in this case, I'm just going to take this arm, push the bend bows here just a little bit, just something like this, and see how that makes the pose feel cleaner. It's not a huge change. Honestly, it didn't really change that much, but now the curve does that. It's more appealing instead of this, which is just like a weird like V shape and not that interesting to look at. That's it. Now, the nice thing with bend bows, and I'm going to just show this off here a little bit, is if your rig allows it, you can also use them as a muscle simulation of sorts. So as this arm comes up and he comes into this pose here, I can use this and I can scale that bend bow up and give him some biceps. So if I plan this out properly and animate this out, you can also see how it takes that arm and makes like a nice solid press right in there. Gets that nice tightness in there. By using the bend bows early, I can basically create a muscle simulation. Now this arm here, I probably want, because of the angle of the wrist here, if I bent the arm this way, I'm going to get a weird bend. So instead, I'm going to do the opposite. We're going to end up getting a little bit more of a V shape, but it's going to flow better with the elbow if I do, or sorry, with the wrist, if I do this, and we're going to just get a stronger shape. Now again, do you have to do this now? No. This is really just something I like to do because I know that if I wait for it, I'm more than likely going to go, meh, I don't have to do it now. I can do it later. And it's always later and later and later, and you never end up doing it. So I would much rather go through and start blocking this in now, just so I have an idea of what's going on. It doesn't have to be super refined. Doesn't have to be perfect. But like this elbow here, or this arm, see how we're getting this kind of weird like zip to the arm? Like it's almost doing that. That to me feels weird. It's like, it's just a weird line on that side. So let's see if I can push that and clean it up just a little bit. Just a little. If I can't, doesn't matter. Oh, okay, I bent it the wrong way there. Always double check in. There you go. That's the right direction. I think I went this way instead. Always double check your directions, and this is why it's always important to animate from multiple cameras. You'll notice I'm always in 2 views. I never do this. So suddenly we get a line that's going through here, and a line that's going through here. And it creates a little bit more of a pinching flow to the arms and legs. Now I can do the same thing with the leg. Right here, the leg is, see how we get that dip there? That is natural for our legs to do, because you have your quadriceps up here, the upper leg, and then it goes down to the tendons and the connecting tissue into the knee. That is anatomically correct, but visually it's not super appealing compared to doing something more like this. Now we get this simple curve that reads much more clearly. Not only that, I can take this and maybe scale it up, and now we get a little bit more of some pressure between the calf muscle and the hamstring right there. I want to write my own version of Richard Leaco's dynamics. That would be really cool. I've been wanting to try those for a while. I just need to find the time. Now, same thing here. See how we're getting this weird, like, whoop, line right there? It's just like, there's this weird, sharp line here. That's definitely something I want to clean up. Now, I could do that in a few different ways. I could use the foot roll here to bring the leg up and start bending the knee forward. I could use, in this case, the leg stretch. Because we're not seeing that foot, I could just stretch the leg. That'll do the same thing. Or I could use a combination of things. So I'm going to just bend the leg up a little bit so he goes up on his tiptoes. And then once again, take the bend bows. And I'm just going to exaggerate them. Let's get rid of that drawing here. Forward. And look at that. It doesn't solve it completely, but now we get a curve going through there. And that's just going to make things much more appealing. Now, the other thing I can do is push the knee out. So see here how now we really feel that curve. And now that whole line of action is just much more appealing and interesting versus how flat it was before. See, my supervisor on my first anim job would use exclusively the shot cam to manipulate, but it's still a mystery to me how his animation would stay clean. I've seen people do that, and it is possible. I wouldn't trust myself more than anything. I feel like I would let it take over too much. Let's see. Now, we can keep pushing the poses. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hand pose from later on. Later on, I go into a bit more of a fist. Is it here already? Yeah. So I'm going to take that fist pose and then copy it over to frame 44. Just to start getting a little bit more visual interest there. And you'll notice that that's what we're kind of doing right now is it's a lot of visual interest. How can we make things look better? So for example, here, that fist is looking straight at camera. So if I turn it down here a little bit, get a little bit more of a 3/4, that could be a little bit more visually interesting. Let's take this arm here and just add a little bit of a bend to it so it flows a little bit better. And then I'm going to give just a little bit of that bicep squeeze in there. And pushing that line in the back there. Now as he comes up here, we could, if we were going to really cartoony, try to push the line of his spine a little bit. So get that nice simple curve and then a pinch in here. Honestly, this is stylistic at this point. How real is this shot going to be? How much do we want this to feel lifelike versus cartoony? If it was lifelike, normally we will always see that. That's kind of the lumbar region of the spine. So we will see those shapes there, but I can always push it a little bit. We can always exaggerate. So on this rig, there's what's called free spine controls. I'm actually going to go through and set a key on these. Free spine controls are basically the bend bows of the spine. So if I want to push the spine here, I can take these and start to shape them just a little bit. And what I'm going to try to do is, once again, push that curve versus bend. So we've got a curve here. I want a little bit more of a bend in that stomach there. So I can take this and maybe just bring that down and rotate it a little bit. Just a little here. Now that's a little too high. I'm going to actually go with this control instead. And just add the tiny feeling of a break right in that ab area. Okay. I feel like the head is not super appealing here. So I'm going to bring it back a little bit. The reason I feel it's not that appealing is how much we can see of the neck right here. Oh no. See, this is the stream where everything goes wrong. I just ran out of hard drive space. Oh boy. Streaming. It's wonderful. Okay, let me save up some hard drive space, because this is going to cause some issues if I don't do that. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So, you see all of these hard drives, and they're all full. Disk clean? No, it's not the disk clean. It's just too many files. I've got 11 or 13 hard drives, and they're all filling up. Too many files on my computer. That's what happens when you start doing multimedia stuff. Okay, this foot's just a little too close to the knee. I'm going to bring it out a little bit more. It's also going to create a little bit better overlap right through here. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm going to do this really quickly. So bend bows, one nice thing with bend bows is once you kind of get a good pass on them. So I'm going to quickly select all the arm bend bows. I can just copy the bend bows from here, paste them onto the next key. Done. This is why I also like to do them early, because if you do them early enough, it's easy just to copy and paste onto all the other poses, and they work. So same thing with the spine control here. Gonna just copy that over. If it doesn't give me exactly what I need, I can just reset it a little bit. So in this case, I just want to kind of push the roundness of the spine just a little bit more. Okay. Same thing with the leg. Let's take our bend bows. And see, I need to turn off that. And then these bend bows here. Copy them over. Pretty much done. I can maybe straighten this out a little bit. I want this to be stronger. And the way I can make it stronger is to make sure that this is a straight line. The more of a curve there is on the upper leg, it'll feel curvier. Nice, yes. But it's also going to feel weaker, which is not necessarily a bad thing. In this case, it's going to weaken the pose to the point where we don't have that nice strong impact in there. Okay. So everything else looks pretty good. Looking at my silhouette, negative space. I'm getting a little bit of butt shelf right here. Is that a bad thing? Nah, not necessarily. Sometimes it can be really bad. I'm going to try to solve it just by adjusting the hip control here and seeing if I can rotate this at any angle that's going to solve it. I don't think there is. Honestly, it's the big thing that's happening is because I'm raising the the leg so high, we're getting that silhouette in there. There is one way I could potentially try to fix this, and that is to turn on the hip control here on this rig. And then I can actually just move that whole region across and around. So for example, like this, see how we're getting this square shape right here? I could key this kind of forward here, and it starts to swoop that line into his leg a little bit more. You want to be very careful with this though. I'm going to set a key on it. I honestly don't think I'm going to keep it, but for now, we're going to see how it feels. Just as an experiment. And then it'll reset back. Right here. Let's see, makes sense though. You'll see this on some rigs more than others. Some rigs are very prone to butt shelf syndrome, where it's just like you see this very square shelf that it looks like they're still sitting down and like their butt is flat against something even though they're standing, and it's just not super appealing. So it's something I always tend to look for, especially when characters are doing more extreme poses like what we have here. Now I feel like I can push the bend bows here just down a little bit. I want to shape that line right there. And then this arm, I want to push the bend bows out a little bit. Now, the big thing with bendos is you have to be careful, otherwise you're going to get wiggly arms. But as long as you keep the motion subtle and clean them up in the breakdowns, no one's going to ever notice them. And it'll just push your poses to be so much more appealing. Yeah, Stuart literally has butt brick. Yeah, that's where I started coining that term, like in my own work, or when I'm ever critiquing people. It's like, oh, that character has like butt shelf, or I like butt brick as well. It was because of that, and then I started noticing it in a lot of other rigs. So it's a common thing. Is it bad? No. You just have to be careful of it. Okay. Let's see. Something always confuses me is to have something leading in step mode with the breakdowns. I'm hoping we can get to that. Now that we're actually progressing here, I think we're going to be able to get into the breakdowns. That's the word I'm looking for. As long as no other things explode. Okay, so we've got the first poses in here pretty good. At this point, we now have the character coming up and relaxing, and we have a terrible line of action here. It is absolutely awful. We've got this and then this. Like, that is not a line of action. That is just a bend. Especially for the character, the way he's positioned here, your hips would be so uncomfortable like this. It wouldn't be fun. So I need to tweak this. Now, when I'm thinking of, okay, I need to push my line of action, the first things that I think about is, what was my line of action before? Which I think I could even push this pose even more, but we'll save that for later. And then what's my line of action later? So we're going from this kind of extreme C to a slightly straightish C curve. So in the middle, what would be nice is if we added a little reversal. That's going to make it dynamic. Right now, the body doesn't reverse. It just kind of stays stiff. So if I push the line of action here to be this way, we would get that nice reversal and get a nice line of action. 2 birds, 1 stone. So that's what I'm going to aim for here. So this is where, as you're working, it's nice to know where your character is going to, where they came from. You can start to exaggerate things a little bit better. So let's take this, and I'm going to just remake this pose basically. I'm going to zero out the spine, push the body over, and this is fine. If ever you have to redo a pose or tweak something, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, actually, let me show you something that's super helpful with this. You can use the grease pencil tool, or like I'm using Epic Pen here, or blue pencil, anything that lets you draw on the screen. You could use a locator, and I'm going to just draw out where his head is here, because I want his head to be approximately the same position. That way my spacing works overall. So I'm just going to mark that right there. And now, as I reset the pose here, let's kind of push the spine, then we'll bring the hips back in here. I can use that as a guide to bring the hips or the head right back to where it was, and my spacing works again. And I'm not guessing. I need more Castlevania music. I really like Castlevania. Okay. So now, look at that line of action. Much cleaner. Even the back here is nice and clean. And we get that nice strong reversal now. So now when we go from one pose to the next, see how that feels stronger? Now, one thing I'm noticing here, visually, the hips should be moving screen left. My hips don't really feel like they're doing that. Now, let's actually bring back our graph editor. Okay, I knew something was missing in my interface. And actually, let's save, because with all of our luck, Maya's gonna explode at any time. I'm going to look at my sideways motion and just make sure that he's actually moving sideways. So this is always a good thing. Double check your graph editor. Visually, he's moving screen left. So I know I do have to move him. But if I'm looking at my graph editor, I can see whether it's actually a mistake in the key, where he might be actually moving screen left some more, or if I just need to exaggerate it. And I can just pull that back a little bit right here. So I'm going to try to bring him back here. And let's play with the translate Z a little bit as well. Have that start changing direction. Now I feel like I'm still not getting enough range there, but I'm also having an issue where the more I push him screen right, the more I'm losing that line of action on the front. I'm starting to get into this W shape here, or this kind of V shape. That's not as interesting. I want that really nice, strong line of action there. So, what are my options? Well, I could move the leg. I could move him back and then try to rotate the hips some more. I could exaggerate this pose. If I need him to move back from this pose, I could move this pose forward a little bit. And I could even try moving the other poses forward a little bit too, just to keep the spacing from being too extreme there. And now we have him moving back. If you watch that corner of his shirt, see how it moves back now? There we go. Your poses are never done until the shot is play blasted, or I should say the shot is finaled. If you're working on a pose like we did here, got it all perfect, fantastic, when you go to the next pose, you can still go back. You can still edit the other pose and make sure that it looks good. You are not glued to what you did before, and well, now I have to make this pose work, and that's it. So always be aware of that as you're working. I see way too many animators when they're polishing or even blocking out work, and especially when they're blocking out work, this is when you don't want that to happen, where they will just go, well, I did it, done, end of story. That's it. I can't do more now because I would have to edit what I did before. And that means I'm doing something wrong. No, that's the process. So right here, I'm just adding I don't know how well you can see it, a little bit of a pinch on that side right there, and then straightening out this line. I could even exaggerate the spine a little bit more here. Just add a little bit more curvature, but I think for now that's fine. Okay. Now the arms, I could copy the bend bows from the previous poses, but because he's starting to relax, I want those biceps to start relaxing as well a little bit. So I'm gonna just add a little tiny bit in there, but at this point we are starting to let the arms straighten out. Okay. Now this arm is kind of bland right now. It's just kind of straight and bored. I might just try to add a little bit more bend here just to keep it visually interesting. So we don't just get that one straight perfect line. And then just cleaning up that curve in there. Same thing with the other hand. Let's add just a little bit of bend bows in here. See, is it really possible to make the audience appreciate all of these subtle changes? Yes, they will appreciate it. I really get this amount of work for painting one image, but you basically paint a series of images and every single one should be the same work of art in itself. Exactly. That's the tricky part of animation. And when I was taught animation, the way I was taught it is, if the audience is going through your shot and they pause on a frame, that frame should look beautiful. Regardless of which frame it is, if they pause on it randomly, we want to make sure that it looks good. That's hard. That really is very hard to get right. But that's what makes something like a Disney film or a Pixar film really stand out compared to like a direct to DVD, just, I don't want to use that in a bad way, but like a no-name brand animated film, or like a TV series where you can tell they don't have the budget or the time. It's how much will they spend polishing every single element in their shot to make it appealing. And the more time you spend in there, the more it's going to show and you're going to feel it. So it's an important thing that we as animators need to do in our work. Let's just push the bend bows in the leg just a little bit more. Now, you don't have to do this. Literally, I could have just gone straight into the breakdown phase. I don't have to do this. This is not a requirement, a must that has to absolutely be done or else you're a bad animator. No. This is just pushing your shot to that next level. And you want to do this quickly. You don't want to spend a ton of time here because things will change. When we add the breakdowns, we're going to be changing poses again. So I am just going through really quickly. So getting that nice line in the leg here. Let's kind of push that line here a little bit more. Now here we've got a nice alternating arm. So this is where we would really be able to sell the musculature of the character. As this arm compresses, we'll get that muscle bulge in there. We can push the curve of the back of the arm just a little bit. Let's push that wrist. It's kind of, see how the back of the hand is facing to camera perfectly? I try to avoid that at all costs. That just looks bland. So try to put a little bit more 3/4 in there. Let's see. Do you always have to think work like this, including in-betweens, or are there some times in which you won't be able to get the perfect pose? It's a tricky question in the sense that a pose, how do I want to phrase this? A pose might not look traditionally appealing. Doesn't mean that it isn't perfect for what it is. So let me actually give an example. So a good example of this is smear frames. Smear frames are when you have to have fast motion, you need to connect two poses together. So this is a great site, by the way, just the art of the smear. Wonderful. You'll see like these poses do not look good per se. So that's one frame right there. You get like all of that going through. Just watch how many smear frames there are going through like that fast whipping motion. Smear frames on their own don't look fantastic. Like right here, it doesn't look good in the sense of like what we find appealing. You wouldn't put this like on your wall as a work of art, but it looks good at speed and for what it is. It's not bland and boring. It's not just like they took the cell and just shifted it over. They drew the pose that needed to be in there. And that's the key, is when I say that we are trying to push these poses and make them look good, we are making it work for the animation that we're on. And that sometimes means breaking the pose or smearing the pose or doing something really weird. But that's what gives it more power and makes it a better pose in the long run. I hope that makes sense. There's something about this clavicle. It's just a little off, so I'm going to try to push it a little bit more. Okay. So here, we've got this nice straight of the arm. That's what I'm going to try to push here. So you can see how there's just a little bit of a bump right in that upper arm. I'm going to try to push it so that we get this nice straight all the way along the top. And this is where you, depending on the shot that you're working on, if it's a more naturalistic shot, you'll want to follow the curvatures of what happens in the arm. But if it's really stylized, you could make a perfectly, let's pick a color that shows up here, a perfectly straight line here. And I'm going to exaggerate the shape here and push the silhouette of the arm on the lower half. Or you could do the opposite and do something like that. Perfectly straight. And then you'd go into the hand. So something like that. Or so something like this, one or the other. This one's probably going to be stronger because it creates a straight line all the way to the edge of the hand. So let's try to go for that. Now, does it have to be perfect? No, but let's see how close we can get. All right. So draw a straight line here and we'll see how close we can get to it. And then I need to push that fist up to match that line as well. A little bit of 3/4 in that hand. Okay. So right now the elbow is starting to look a little funky. When you're doing stuff like this, like I would consider this to be that you're really starting to push the exaggeration of a pose. For a more realistic VFX style shot, you wouldn't really do this because you'll notice. But we get something a little bit more like that. Let's see if we can nudge it just a little bit more. So let's actually compare. Just see what we had before and after. So I'm going to just take this and I'm going to just set a key here and zero that out. So you can see it's not a huge difference. But here the arm feels like there's not a huge, like it just kind of feels like it's out there, but it's kind of relaxed a little bit. By doing this, suddenly it feels like that arm is taut. It's straight as it can be. So does it make a huge difference? No. But it's enough of a difference that we can feel it. And that is important enough that it's worth doing. Now, once again, I know I keep reiterating this, but it's a very important thing to keep in mind. When you are doing this, you are not having to get all of this working right away. Let me just look at my reference here. I want to see which angle my wrist is at. Okay, yeah. That's what I thought. It needs to be higher up here. We want to do this quickly. Otherwise, we're going to end up we're going to waste time. We are trying to just block this in so we have a guide to follow as we add our breakdowns. And this will make our breakdowns more dynamic because our poses that we built off of are going to be more dynamic. If we don't do this right now, we'll have to do it later anyway. So we don't have to, but if we do it later, it means that we're going to just have more work to do later. And the problem with kind of saving it for later, at least in my eyes, this is why I do it now, is if I wait till later, I'm going to have twice as many frames to do this on. Or like 3 times as many frames. So if I do it now, I've only got like 10 frames. And then when I add the breakdowns, all those things that I put in there are already there. And I can use them to build my poses faster. So for example, here, we've already got that leg cleaned up. So just copy that over, key it, and then slight adjustment. There we go. And same thing here. And then the body, I kind of feel like it's a little straight there, but I kind of like that because it contrasts well with the next part here. I feel like if anything, it just needs to start bending a little bit more because we get this kind of big chunk motion here. It just feels like it crashes forward a little too much. So I want to lead that a little bit where we start to feel the body bending a little bit forward before it then goes down. And Tara, take care. Have a great night. And thanks for the reminder. And Fraternity, hello. Today we're going over mostly tech issues, like Tara mentioned. It was just a lot of tech issues this morning. Let's see, I'm just trying to see how I don't like the silhouette of the neck right here. How we see so much neck back there. So I'm gonna just see if I can push that. It's not super appealing. That feels better. It doesn't feel quite so hunched. It's not quite as strong in the twist, but I think I prefer it. We'll see. We can always come back and change it when we start adding in some breakdowns. Okay. Okay, now we're going through here. This leg is going to be very easy. I think up until... yeah, basically up until the end. I'm just going to copy this pose all the way through to the end. And see how that feels. I think we might just need to push this a little bit more here. And that leg is pretty much done for the whole shot. Now, same thing with this leg. We just want to get that nice clean shape in there. And then quickly copy that over. When you get used to using bend bows, it really doesn't take all that much time to get it all in there. Doesn't mean you can't change the key poses later without messing those perfect lines. Oh, they're gonna get messed up. This is why we don't want to spend a lot of time on this. These are going to change. This is really just a quick pass to just get the poses a little bit more interesting and appealing. You can wait till later to do it, but I just like to do it now because it makes it easier to add the breakdowns in. And I know that my posing in general, like now that I've got lots of practice, in general tends to be pretty good like throughout, and I don't have to make any huge changes. So I would much rather do it now and just get it over with and not have to worry about anything than trying to put it all in later, because it's going to have to go in. And the problem with doing it later, at least to me, is there will be times when you're going to start tweaking all of this and it's just going to change your like core poses, which means that then you have to change a whole bunch of stuff later on in the animation, and your silhouettes have to be changing a whole big chunk of the shot. It gets very messy. So yeah, I like to keep it kind of all contained, if that makes sense, into this one moment, this one process. Okay. Now that arm is a little bit more interesting. We're getting a tangent right here at his chest, so I'm gonna bring that arm back a little bit. This is the other thing that I like about this is our first blocking pass. When you're doing your blocking pass, it can be very easy to miss things like tangents and certain posing things where as you're blocking it, I was like, oh yeah, this looks pretty good. This looks pretty good. And then once you like go through it again, you realize that like, oh wait, my posing sucks. It's just bad. I did so many things wrong, or like I've got tangents. I want to get rid of those before, again, I add a ton of keys, because the more keys I have, the harder it becomes to change anything. If I want to push a pose and make it more dynamic, that's a little too far. Push a pose, make it more dynamic. I'm going to end up having to change 5 poses instead of just the one right now. I hope that makes sense. Like the thought process behind it. Kind of want to straighten that elbow just a little bit. Okay. And then here, just gonna lower this. I want a little bit better silhouette right in there. Okay, and then same thing here, line. Now, the main thing here is this, it feels like it's taking a long time because, well, I'm explaining the process. Normally this process would only take like half an hour, if that. It doesn't help that we crash so often. Like this whole process really, we're not spending a ton of time on it. My main like thought on this is double checking my blocking, making sure I know my poses work, making sure I get appealing poses in general. And like for example right here, we're getting this little bit of like the obliques, or not the obliques, this would be the yeah, it would be the obliques, right there, this little bunching up right there. I could get rid of that right now, just improve that pose just a little bit more. In this case, it's just going to be taking the hip control and just kind of rotating that a little bit. Okay, so we've got just this 2 more poses, and then we can finally break things down. I was hoping to get all the breakdowns done today, but spending 2 hours troubleshooting takes away some time from the stream. So we might have to keep that for next stream, but I do want to do at least one. The whole topic of the stream was supposed to be breakdowns. You add the holds in blocking? Yes. So that's going to be the next thing I want to talk about, is the importance of breakdowns and holds specifically. Okay, and then here, let's kind of give him a little bit more muscle here as he's kind of flexing. He's not really flexing, but just this pose in general would lend itself to a flex. Okay. So just kind of watching that silhouette, pushing it to be a little bit more visually appealing. And oftentimes you don't have to push it too far. If you're doing a cartoony shot, then you can just go all out. That's what this type of phase right here in your animation is especially helpful when you're doing cartoony animation. If you're not doing this when you're doing cartoony animation, you're going to miss out on a lot of potential creative posing. It's going to flatten things out a lot, and not in like a good way. It'll just be bland. So try to incorporate, like if you're doing cartoony animation, try to incorporate this at some point. So what I'm doing here is, it looked like right here, see how his hand looks like he's grabbing at his shirt? I want to move that just so that the silhouette's a little bit more clear. Okay. So we get that. There we go. Not a huge change, but now we've got all of our poses and they're just a little bit more visually appealing. And once again, you're just going through, making sure your line of action is good. I think the biggest pose change was this one. If we look back on the previous version, which was here, see how much that pose has changed? Look at that one. Ugh. It's just so bad. There's no line of action. The head's going this way, the body's going this way. It's just zigzagging the whole way through. This one's better. I think I need to reset his head angle though. Kind of looking at the old one. I liked the head angle before a little bit more. So easy fix. Turn his head a little bit more to camera. A little bit higher up. Done. Haha. But now we've got the nice clean line of action going right through the whole thing, which then makes a much stronger reversal into this. It just makes the whole moment stronger. Okay. So we've done that pass. Finally. It only took, what, 2.5 hours? Yay. Considering how long of, like 2.5 hours, it was an hour and a half, if not more, of troubleshooting just to get it done. Ugh. Animation. Woo. Gotta love it. So let's go over the importance of breakdowns and holds, because at this point, sure, we've made our poses look better, we've pushed them through, great. If we're not careful, we're still going to get boring animation. So for example, this was our last play blast that we had, and it looks okay. If we go into splines right here, there's no holds and there's no timing anymore. It just kind of shifts and slow. So there's two ways we can start adding holds and start detailing our animation. Now, holds are going to be the very most important thing we need, especially if you have a more subtle shot. In my shot, the character is kind of moving all the time. That's fine. But in more subtle shots, you need to describe your holds. When is a character not moving? And the first method when you're using a pose-to-pose workflow that we can that will help to define this is what's typically called copied pairs. So I'm going to use this as an example, but let's say our character has to come in here and then he hits this pose and we want that to hold for a few frames. So in my animation, I actually hold that for like 4-ish frames. Well, right now, if I was to just go straight into splines, the character hits that pose and automatically starts to go out. There's no hold whatsoever. So to save this hold, what we need to do is use the copied pair method. I'm going to take this key, I'm going to middle mouse drag 4 frames later, and then set a key. What that does is it copies that one key over to the next frame. So now from frame 49 to frame 53, he doesn't move. And then from there, let's actually get this back into splines here. So he comes down, holds, then comes out. There you go. That is very important. So if you have a character walking through, pause, and hey, hi, Perez Animation, thank you so much for the sub, the gift. That's so awesome. And Celia, welcome. You are now a sub. Thank you so much. That's super generous of you. So that's really super generous. So what was I saying? I've totally lost track of my thoughts. Okay, one thing I'm noticing is this pose, it still needs to be pushed more. See how flat this is right here? This is what happens when I start paying attention to things. Like, it's still way better than it was, but could be better. Could be even more. I'm just gonna try to exaggerate a little bit more. Oh, make sure I actually do it on the right frame. But anyway, the copied pairs allows you to hold a pose and essentially let a character stay still. That is very, very important because otherwise, oh yeah, that's why it looks dull. There wasn't actually supposed to be a key there, was there? Okay, yeah, right there. So if we don't push things, or sorry, let me get my thoughts back in mind. If we don't use something like copied pairs, your character is just going to be moving and sliding across all the time. And that's not good. It creates a very floaty animation that doesn't have any timing anymore. But copied pairs is just a very basic way of blocking out your hold. Like, it's just like, it's there, but it still doesn't solve the main issue that comes with the pose to pose workflow of everything feeling pose to pose. So I'm going to draw this out just for the sake of speed. So let's say you have 3 spheres. There, there, and there. So this is going to be on frame 1. Or actually, let's animate it. I've got animation tools here. And then on frame 10, they're going to go over here. So there, there, there. Now, if we were in Maya and we just did this, what you would get is a straight line. They would go from point A to point B the whole time. It wouldn't look really good. So we'll use the first method that we talked about, copied pairs. Okay, we want to add maybe a hold at the beginning. Instead of it going from frame 1 all the way to frame 10 and just moving constantly, we want that to hold longer at the beginning. Great. So we're going to copy frame 1 and then paste it on, let's say, frame 6. So we're just going to use that same pose and move it here. Yay. But that doesn't solve the issue of pose to pose. Instead of frame 1 to frame 10 moving evenly from one to the next, okay, now nothing's moving from frame 1 to 6. Yay, we've got a hold. But then from 6 to 10, everything is moving evenly. That's still not interesting. It's just going to be sliding across. It'll literally just be this, whoop, to the end. No, that is boring. That's what we are getting here, is everything just slides, hit a pose, slide, hit a pose, slide, hit a pose. Breakdowns are where we get the cool element of the animation, because not only does it make our in-betweens more interesting, it creates new holds. And that's what's going to break up your action and make things dynamic. So, for example, normally when people think of breakdowns, so we're going to go right in the middle here, frame 8, they will go, okay, I just have to put some keys in here. And they will literally just go in Maya, set a key, and then a little changing. No, because if I just put something right here, I've done no better than Maya has. I just put it right in the middle. That's not going to be good. So I need to think, what's going to lead? What's going to follow? Well, maybe I want to lead with the top. So think of this like the head, chest, hips. Maybe I want the character to lead with the head first. So right here, maybe the top sphere, we're just going to go in a straight line here, just for simplicity's sake. The head is going to be a little bit further. So this is our breakdown. Now the chest might be a little further back, and the hips just a little bit further back from that. So we're starting to get a curve here. Well, that is already more dynamic because we're going to get a little bit more lead with the head versus the hips. Yay. Now this is a super simple example, but the problem with this is that we still haven't really solved the pose to pose feeling, because now on frame 7, this is the in-between that Maya would give us. We're going to get this, where everything starts moving at the same time and it's still even and boring. No. The most important part of a breakdown is not just the description of how things move, but when things stay still. So for example, if I'm leading with the head and I start tilting forward, my head will lead, my chest might follow a little bit, but my hips don't have to move right away. So on this frame, if I put up my own breakdown again, another breakdown, I'm going to keep the hips the same. The head will start to lead the action, and the chest might just barely move here. So now we get this breakup, and I feel like I could drag the hips a little bit more here. This breakup of action where part of it doesn't move. It creates a longer hold here, whereas another thing starts to move first, and then we'll add another breakdown here, and maybe the head will overshoot. It'll go past while the body catches up, and the hips might still be dragging back. So now we get this. Now we've got an overshoot. We've got extra motion going on as the hips are still going in that direction. We could push this in all sorts of different ways. But by breaking things down and really thinking of our breakdowns, it breaks up the pose to pose to pose. Breakdowns are insanely important. If you're breaking things down just by going, okay, middle, key, little change, middle, key, little change, you are not breaking things down. You are, I don't mean this in a mean way, but you are essentially doing what Maya is doing. You might as well just hit splines and call it a day. When you are breaking things down, you need to think through how they will transition from one pose to the next. So let's take an example here. I'm not going to be able to do the whole thing because I'm going to have to go in just a little bit. But I do want to kind of show a good example here. Well, actually, let's go here. So the main thing as I'm breaking things down, a lot of people have different ways of breaking things down. Sir Wade covers this a little bit in his workflows videos. There's a few different thought processes when you are breaking things down, and I'm actually going to write these down here. So you have the traditional, or let me put it this way. So when you're trying to figure out where you should put your breakdowns, you have, I'm not going to use the important moments. So important moments. This would be a good place to put a breakdown. So important moments are like peaks, like highs and lows, extremes. So for example, if I turn my head and it's going to arc downwards, I would put a breakdown at the lowest point where my head is at its lowest. That way I know that I get the full arc of motion. It's things like that. It's these important little beats that can work. Now this kind of leads into the next thought process of adding breakdowns, which is the how do I want to call this? Overshoot, anticipation, and overlap. So instead of focusing on just a few important moments, you go through and you put a breakdown for all of your anticipation. So if the character is going to start anticipation, you put a breakdown there. You then go through and do a pass, put all your overshoots in. You do another pass, put in your overlap moments, and you break those down. That can work as well. You have the straight ahead method, which is basically you have your key poses now, and you're just going straight ahead. And John, thank you so much for the sub. 9 months, jeez. I'm doing well. How have you been? I haven't seen your shot in a while. I need to draw some Navis. I'm gonna do one here just because. There we go. Listen. There we go. So straight ahead is basically you have your two key poses, And then you just kind of go straight ahead between those two until you have enough breakdowns. My typical, hey, did we just get a host? I don't know. My notifications are a little weird right now. If so, thank you so much. Let's see, I keep checking in during my class breaks, and every time I marvel at everything that has happened. All the problems of Maya. Think I'm done with the horse walk cycle. Nice. I'd love to see it at some point if ever you post it somewhere. So yeah, straight ahead. That should be closer together. It looks like 2 words. Straight ahead. So the other one, another workflow that I tend to use is, I don't really have a term for it. It's like a mixture of straight ahead, but specifically it's, I wish I had a good term for it. And Fraukus, thank you so much for the sub as well. Oh geez, 6 months. Everyone's been subbing for so long. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'll put this as enough keys. We'll call it that. Or enough breakdowns. Basically what it means is that I want to have enough keys in there, enough breakdown keys, that I know that when I go into splines, everything will work. And it's a kind of a mixture of all of them. This is kind of the workflow that I find helpful for me. It's the one that makes most sense in my head. So I've talked about this before on the streams, but basically I will try to aim for having a key every 6 to 12 frames. 12 frames for holds. Every 4 to 6 frames approximately for slow motions, so things that don't move very fast. Every 3 to 4 frames for normal motions. So actually 2 to 4 for normal motions. That's just like normal everyday kind of speed motions. And then 1 to 2 frames for fast or complex motions. So that's the way I typically try to approach it. So that's my personal workflow, and it kind of mixes a little bit of all of them. So it's a little straight ahead, a little overshoot, a little important moments. So for example, here we've got this first section, and this is not a very fast moment, but there's a lot of complex things happening. We've got the arms moving, we've got the leg coming up, we've got the head kind of starting to come forward and down. I don't want to have all of this keyed on once. It's not complex enough for that. But right now we have 6 frames. I could break it down in half and have 3 and 3. But I feel like I wouldn't get enough information in here to properly describe this breakdown. Specifically the fact that this leg down here is taking longer to push forward than the rest. So I'm going to try to break this down onto 2s to make sure that I have enough keys without going overboard. And then if I need a little bit more, I can always add an extra key here or there. So I'm going to put in a breakdown on frame 40 and then another breakdown on frame 42. This is the way I think about it. It's making sure I have enough information. So if I set a key here, and let's actually set our default tangent types. Let's stick with step mode. And I'm going to show a quick trick here. So if you're blocking in step mode, your poses won't change between 2 keys, which is great. That's kind of what you want. If I set a key here, I don't want to have Maya throwing things in for me. But, and this is a big but here, there is an issue. And that is that now between these 2 frames, I manually have to move every single thing to make sure that they don't sit still. Because I don't want, like, there's supposed to be motion here. I don't want one part of the body being forgotten and staying still when it should be moving. I would much rather accidentally have a little too much motion than having something frozen in place when it shouldn't be. So, when you're breaking things down, and even if you're working in step mode, a quick little trick that you can do is just take your curves, put them in linear mode or auto tangent mode, set a key, and then go back to step mode. Now, your character is moving right here, and we know that everything is moving just a little bit. And from there, you can start rebuilding your pose. We do not want to keep what Maya gave us here, but we want to just use it as a starting point so that we don't have to do all the manual work ourselves. So now as we look at this, the big thing that I want to do is the same idea with those spheres that I drew out. I want to push the lead and follow. What is moving the most? What is not moving? And this is where reference can come in handy, especially when you're first starting out and trying to understand how this works. Look at what's moving between these two keys. If we look at the reference, we can feel the chest moving. We can feel the clavicles moving up, the shoulders and arms moving up. The head is moving down, but it doesn't really move that much. It's almost sitting still. We're just getting a little forward motion in the neck. The leg and the hips aren't really moving too much, not too much at all. And then this knee, it's moving forward, but the foot, if you could see, the foot hasn't left the ground yet. So the majority of the motion is in the hands. Now, if we look at our animation, what looks like it's moving the most? It's the leg. Honestly, the leg feels like it's got the biggest change that's happening, and the arms don't really feel like they're moving that much. They should be popping up here. They should pop up. So you figure out what's leading, what's following. In this case, the arms are leading. The head is staying still. The foot is still on the ground. And from there, I can start breaking this down properly. So the foot, I want to stay on the ground. So I'm going to copy the previous pose right there. It's on the ground, but I'm just going to rotate it up. So we still get that little forward motion of the knee here. See how suddenly that feels like that foot is pushing up off of the ground versus just slamming up, sliding up. Okay, we've got that. The other leg is staying still, so haha, that's done. Let's get the hips in here. The hips, the main thing I'm feeling right now is a little bit of rotate Y, a little bit of rotate X. So this is where I'm gonna start using the graph editor a little bit, because I can start dialing things in. So I want the hips to kind of go forward here. So I'm kind of watching the line of the zipper. Go forward there, and the rotate Y should be bigger. There should be a twist, which actually tells me that this twist here should be a little bit further back. There we go. Now we feel that twist. So you can even change the poses you've already done. There's nothing wrong with that. And then I'm gonna have to twist the body back here a little bit. Okay. So see now how we feel the hips, we get that twist in the hips, but I also want to keep it a little bit more stationary on this side. If you look at the hips, see how we feel most of the motion on the right side? The left side is moving, but not as much. So let's try to break that down a little bit more. That's probably going to be my translate X. Let's just tone that down a little bit. So it still moves sideways. Still want that motion in there. But now you see how that side barely moves. And this side, the leg that's pushing up, is starting in a smaller way. it's leading the action of the hips rotating. Okay, so we've got that. The spine, there really isn't too much of a change in there. So I'm going to try to keep the spine pretty simple. I do want his head to keep going forward, so let's see. Yeah, looking at the shoulders, there's forward motion going there. So I'm just going to kind of tilt the character forward and then just a little bit further back, just so we don't get that super S shape in the body here too soon. So we get that. Okay. Let's push the shoulders. That's going to be the big one. The shoulders are like crazy leading this action. So right there. See how now the shoulders are the biggest thing that are moving on this pose? You know, another thing I can do is just push the knee back a little bit. That'll help. There you go. Now we really feel the shoulders being the things that lead the motion here. The arm can come up a little bit here, but I still want that shoulder to be the thing that leads the action. And this is where I can also start pushing my arcs as well. So if he's going to be going in and doing this motion, elbows inwards, I can arc outwards, and that's going to be my anticipation for the elbows coming in. So as the shoulder goes up here, I'm going to try to make sure that the elbow rotates outwards, like so. We might lead a little bit more with the elbow here. Keep that nice angle there. The other arm, we can see, look at this. Look at the relationship between the elbow, how it barely moves, and the wrist. We're getting the lead motion in the wrist. So from here to here, elbow should stay out. See that? Anticipate outwards because it's going to come in. And then instead, it's the arm that moves upwards. So I'm using my reference. I'm not trying to copy my reference. This is important. You're not just copying your reference and just doing every little thing. You're using it to inspire you to make the motions more interesting. So we break that down. I could maybe push the wrists back a little bit. Now the head, the neck is going to start to come down, but we're really not seeing too much motion in the head. So I'm actually going to copy the previous pose, and we're just going to use the neck to get most of our way there, like that. And I'm also seeing a little tilt back of the head, so that's creating a drag. See how you can kind of feel the chin moving forward first? So I'm going to exaggerate that. There we go. So suddenly, that motion is just a little bit more interesting. Instead of just being this straight, boring in between, everything's moving at the same time, the arms are leading, the leg is starting to push forward, the head is just barely moving, and we've got a little drag. We're building all of these elements in to the breakdown, and we're trying to think, how is it going to go into the next moment? So we keep going through here. Now I'm doing the straight ahead method, so I'm just I could go straight through, or you could kind of go through your shot back and forth. So I might do a pass, put like another breakdown in here where there's this big gap, another breakdown in here where there's a big gap, get all the big gaps kind of filled in, and then slowly kind of whittle it down. Is really up to you. So here, if we look at this, the head still barely moves. The big motion of the head is right here, between 42 and 44. So I'm going to make sure that the head still favors, and actually, let's actually use our little trick here. So 40 to 44. Right now there's no motion in between these two. Let's just delete that key, put our curves into linear, set a key, and then put it back into step mode. You could also use like a tween machine or something like that, but if you don't have Animbot or something, this is basically what it does. So let's break things down. Let's actually start with the feet once again. So the foot, we can definitely see that the knee catches up right here. So I want to bring this back a little bit further down. Maybe have the toes just leaving the ground. If I really wanted to push this, I'm gonna pose it out manually. So we have a little bit more drag on the foot here. I could use a locator to get that position just right. So the leg's starting to kick up. Building that anticipation is going to make this moment kick out even stronger. As we go through, the hips are almost easing in already. And since it's a subtle motion, I can just go into the graph editor and just ease that in. This is why I always work with the graph editor open all the time. It just makes it very easy to build that thing in right away. I'm actually going to ease out there. So this is where I'm going to change it a little bit from my animation or from my reference. I noticed that all the translates were just easing in all into the next pose, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But the problem with that is that it's going to make a pose or a change that could potentially feel kind of boring. So by having two of the attributes ease in and one of them not ease in quite as much, is going to keep it more interesting. Not everything is happening at the same time and the same speed. Okay. So let's go through here. The rotate X. That's definitely going to ease in here. I really want to push that hip leading the action here. I could actually push it a little bit more here too. There we go. I'm going to have to adjust the spine because of that. That's fine. I really tend to start getting into the graph editor at this point. And there we go. So we've got that. So you really feel that like thrust of the hips first, and then they ease in there. Okay. Let's keep going with the hips. Let's ease this in a little bit. This should probably... This is not going to ease as much because this is the rotate Z. So this is going to be the hips raising. So yeah, let's do that. Okay. So that's the hips. Now, what else are we seeing here? Well, one thing I'm noticing is that as I go forward, see how our body lurches to the side now? Okay, let's find out why. So our breakdown is 42, and it's the hips. I think it's a little bit of the translate X. We need to just move it a little bit more screen left. That'll connect them. And then the other is the spine. We need to watch the arc. So I'm watching the shirt right now, and it goes forward, and then it kind of pauses a little bit. I think we need a little bit more rotate Z right there to kind of push it forward so that it then goes down and through. So just like that. And you can always double check your curves, make sure they make sense. Right now, it's not quite making sense. See how it kind of wiggles there? I'm just going to double check a few things. Translate X. That should make sense. Yep. I might push him just a little bit more forward. If you start seeing wiggles in this curve for no explanation, like you're just doing it because, double check your animation. Okay, so that's better, but we're starting to get this little right here. See how the neck feels very linear and boring? So I want to push that. I want to favor the top here. So let's take our Z and bring that back down. Like that. And I think our hips need to go up as well. Yeah, that's better. So now if you watch that neck, see how it doesn't just kind of move in a straight linear line? We're trying to exaggerate these even now. Okay. So right now the body is very simple, so we're doing a lot of like small little changes. Now let's go to the arms. The arms are going to be much bigger. So shoulders, they're basically going to just like crunch in on themselves here. The head continues to drag back a little. Let's add a little arc to that. Whenever you have a head motion, it's good to avoid just one axis of motion. So I want him to have a little bit of a twist in that head, like that. I wonder if maybe I should go the other way. Yeah, that feels better. So now we get just a little bit of a turn before he swings his head in. The other thing I know is that the head has a little translation, so I'm going to bring that up a little bit. There we go. Okay. Now still feeling kind of bland and boring. Why? Well, let's get the arms out of the way and then we can figure that out. So the elbow here is going to start coming up. And we want that nice motion of the arm first, right here, while the elbow drags back. So the elbow is still going to be back here. That. So one arm is definitely leading more than the other. Let's kind of bring it out, get that arcing motion through. So I'm thinking of my arcs as I'm going through this. Okay. Coming through. The other arm. Let's bring it down. And let's see, what's this elbow doing? Let's keep it a little bit more open. It kind of opens up a little bit. I could even ease that out this way. And then we get that nice crunch in. Okay, we're getting there. Now that we've got the arms in place, we can start to track our arcs a little bit more. So I'm looking at this hand. I'm noticing that it kind of hops back and then forward here. I think part of it might be this pose. I need to bring this back. Yeah, that's better. So like I said, once you get into the breakdown phase, you're going to be changing a lot of your poses. Okay, big spacing here of the hand, eases in, good. Other hand, I'm getting a little bit of an elbow wiggle here, I feel. I'm going to push that out a little bit more. And part of it is the wrist. See how it goes in, out, in? I want to keep that simpler. So let's open that up a little bit more. And then bring this in just a little bit more, and then this in just a little bit more. There we go. Is slow motion in animation normally faked slow motion, or is it actually slowed down? I'm not sure what you mean by faked, but the way you would animate it is that you don't just take, like, let's say I'm taking this shot here. I wouldn't just animate it normally and then slow it down, because that's not going to make it feel like actual slow motion. It'll just feel like a clip that's slowed down. Instead, you have to animate it in slow motion. Think of it this way: if you took just a normal video camera and then filmed something and then tried to slow it down so that it looked like it was like one of those high-speed cameras that capture like 10,000 frames or something, it's not going to work, because the camera, like, you just don't have that information to fill in the gaps. Animation is the same thing. If we try to just fake it and make it look like it's in slow motion, it's just going to look like it's slowed down versus actually in slow motion. So you want to animate it to have all the detail in place. Okay. So the thing that was feeling even, let me actually undo this just to show what I was looking at. If you watch between frame 40 to 44, this motion here, we're starting to get a little bit of blandness in there. And the reason for that is if you look at the hip and the back right here, from this pose to this pose to this pose, see how they're even right now? It all just kind of stays in line with itself. So this is making that whole motion just feel boring. We don't have a lead and follow between the chest and the hips. It's very subtle. There's not a big cartoony moment here. But I can exaggerate that and make it look better just by dragging that body back here a little bit. And now the hips, you really feel those hips leading that action, and then the body has to catch up. Okay, so that's feeling better. Now the problem here is by doing that, my spacing on the head has now tweaked. So if we watch the chin, it goes from there, forward there, and then it slows down, and then starts to speed up. That's not good. So let's bring that back a little bit. I'm just going to bring the head back a little bit more here. This is where using like a screen marker can be very nice. I'm just going to bring that forward. There we go. If I want to ease that a little bit more and kind of push the lead and follow, exaggerated from my reference, I can drag the neck back here and then go forward. So now we feel like he's leading with his chin here, and then the neck just juts forward and then down. And suddenly that's more interesting. I feel like my hand pose right here is just not that interesting spacing wise, so I'm going to push that as well. Kind of push that up, then maybe just a little higher up here. There we go. So we just feel that a little bit stronger. Okay. So this is the breakdowns. Now, you don't have to break down as much as I'm doing here. Sometimes it's a lot less. For example, from this pose here, as I'm breaking this down, I might only put 4 frames, like one every 4 frames. So I'll have a pose here on 49. The next one will probably be, actually probably 3, probably like 52, because it's just a hold there, a moving hold. So I don't need a key every other frame. This section right here, as I'm going back, is kind of slow. So I might only need every 3 or 4 key, or 3 or 4 frames there. This section here, I definitely am going to probably be animating on 2s. There might be some sections where I go on 1s. We'll see. It really depends on how much I want to get in, like on this first pass. But let's clear this out. We'll call this for now. Next stream, I'm gonna finish the breakdown process. One thing I haven't done here is, even though we're breaking this down, I still want to push my bend bows and things. So, for example, here, that arm is starting to straighten out a little too much. So I want to keep that bend in there. Not a big deal if we kind of miss out on it right now, but this is something to keep in mind. The more you do it now, the less you'll have to do it later. Okay. So let's actually do a play blast of this. And let's actually, I'm going to just turn off my image plane just so we don't need to see that. And let's do a full play blast here. And specifically, even though we've only done like 2 breakdowns here, the big thing I want to show is the difference between no breakdowns and actually having proper breakdowns. I'm just setting up my play blast settings since I reset my preferences. Okay, and then this is going to be breakdowns. Okay, let's play blast. For the slow motion, would you start doing the animation in real time and make it easier to feel weight and such, then scale it up for more frames? It really depends on the project. Usually if you're going to be doing a project in slow motion, there's so many details that go into slow motion that you're going to have to redo a lot if you just animated normally then slowed it down. So you just start in slow motion. But if you're going to just do a little bit of slow motion, just like a little extra hold, yeah, adding a little extra time is not a bad thing. So let's see, get that play blasted, and then let's see. So we have our old version here. So you can see that's about it. That beginning, we just very simple Goes down, up, down. Now when we went into splines, that whole first beginning part here, you can see how everything goes up at the same time. The head comes down, the arms go up, the leg goes up, the hips go up. There's no flow in here. It's just straight. By pushing the breakdowns, and it looks like my camera got changed. Well, maybe not. Just a little further out. See how we feel just a little bit more impact in there? We feel the arms lead the motion upwards. It's very slight. We could exaggerate. At this point, that's what I would do next, is we followed the breakdowns, we kind of followed our reference, but that's not interesting enough. We want to exaggerate. So for this, I would probably have the arms come up much faster, hold at the top, and then slam down. Right now, it's just a little too even. So it's just a matter of spacing. But we can already see that, yeah, it feels different. It has a curve, it has arcs. So for example, here, I want this to be the peak. Right there. So right in here. So I'm going to take this arm, maybe bring it up just a little bit more. Let's see, how high does this elbow go? Maybe bring this up a little bit more over here. And then maybe a little lower. I don't want it to interfere with the other arm. Push the elbow out. So I'm watching the wrists. I want them to come in. And then here, let's bring these up as well. Here as well. So I'm watching the elbows now. Trying to push the arc. I'm watching that elbow. How can I push the arc a little further out here? So it goes out, out, out. Now the wrist in. Okay, it needs to go out just a little bit this way. So now it goes out and then inwards. So we're pushing those arcs. The other arm here. I can still push the lead of the wrist here, because that's what was leading last time in the reference. I'm going to have the wrist lead here, but then catch up a little bit more up here. And you can see here by the end, the wrist barely moves right there. And I could maybe just add a little bit more drag there. Okay. So I'm just going to do another quick play blast. We did a very small change, but now we're not following our reference. Now we are going through and trying to push the appeal. We got the information from our reference. We got what leads, what follows. We analyzed it. We changed it as we were looking at it to make sure that we're building something interesting. But at this point, I can do what I want. Whatever is going to make the shot look better. And now, let's see. So we had this version where it's kind of even with the arms. Let's see how this feels. See how now the arms kind of come up and you feel that hold just a little longer. It holds, then we feel that slam come down. Suddenly that's a little stronger. And that's with 2 breakdowns. We've got a whole shot full of breakdowns we can put in now. So breakdowns are where you're going to get everything to look good. And it's really thinking through it. Thinking through all of the motion. How do you want certain things to lead? What do you want to have follow? What arcs do you want to put in? The overshoots, all of that stuff. So very, very important. And hopefully on Friday, as long as nothing breaks in the stream again, we should be able to break all of this down and get into a first pass of splines. Breaking things down, honestly, if you have really good poses and you've got like a good solid base, breaking things down doesn't really take too long. You still want to take your time, think things through, but once you get used to it, it's not terrible. See, I find it hard to find the right balance for the blocking plus. Either I have not enough and my spline is nightmare, or I have too much and my polish starts with cleaning all the blocking details that look weird. What are the things you ignore at the blocking, knowing it'll be easier to polish? So for me, it's independent motions. So for example, if I've got a character who's sitting still and they're just doing this and they're waving, I'm not going to try to capture every single wave because nothing else is really happening in the body. I'd be good just doing this and then this once or twice, and then that's it. And when I go into splines and the polish, I can just add some extra keys on the hand and then I'm good. The rest of the body isn't doing much, so I don't need tons of keys there. The same thing would happen if I've got, like, for foot plants and stuff. When the foot contacts the ground, you have the contact, then it should be keyed to be flat, then the toes get flat. As it pushes off, you want all of that detail pushing up. I don't get that until splining, because that means I'm going to have, for every contact, like, keys on ones, and I'm not going to do that on the whole body. Things like blinks, little details like that. If it's a big storytelling moment, so maybe a big motion of the head turning, and it's only the head turning, I'll typically block that up, but that's usually because a head turn doesn't last that long. If the character was doing this and shaking their head, yeah, I might save that for splining, because if nothing else is moving and they're just shaking their head, it's a lot of extra keys just for nothing. Let's see, in Ratatouille, Telford, some characters, they didn't animate toes. Do you think that affected the rig for the feet? No. No, usually you don't animate toes. Like, this rig here has toes. And yeah, as long as you don't see them. And even if you do see them, toes don't move that much. Our toes are not wiggling around. Like, if you see people wearing sandals, you don't see their toes trying to crawl out of the end of the sandals or like wiggling around. They'll do a little bit of motion here and there if they've got sand between the toes or something like that. But for the most part, our toes just don't move. So if you don't animate the toes, most people will never notice. Unless you're looking at the feet specifically and they're doing something that they should be moving their toes in. So same thing with my hand. Like, if I do this, my fingers don't have to be animated because, well, not a ton of animation, because it's not like I'm always doing this. I'm just gesturing and like, oh, over there. I'm going to add maybe a little tiny flex of the fingers, but there's not going to be much. So, yeah, that's totally normal. If we don't need to animate it, we don't animate them. So especially if your character's wearing boots or shoes and you can't see the toes, why animate the toes?